Hello and welcome to this video dedicated to adjectives. Now adjectives come in a simple form such as interesting, funny, dark, tired and so on, but also in other forms called comparatives. Now these three here belong to the comparatives, so there are three forms of comparatives, and these are the two forms that you will find for the superlatives. So this video is about the comparatives and superlatives. Now let's look at this in detail. As is when I place my adjective here, as interesting as funny as dark as long as happy as good as bad as, and as far as. Now those are what we call the comparatives of equality. So we have two things, we're trying to compare two elements, and they are similar, they are equal in this case. If, however, I want to stress that something has a quality which is inferior to another thing's quality, then I'm going to use less than. I place my adjective between less and I stress that one of the two elements that I'm comparing is inferior to the other. It is less complicated than, less sunny than, less tired than, less long than, less happy than, less good than, less bad than, and less far than. So there are no irregularities there, it's quite straightforward. Here is when it becomes a bit more exciting here. So the comparative is superiority and the superlatives. Now here, the comparative, we are comparing two things and stressing that one is superior to the other in a certain way. It is more beautiful than, it is more complicated than, it is more interesting than. So there are no particular changes, it's quite easy. I place my adjective between more and than. However, here we have a variation. So if my adjective is nice and long, so here we have three syllables or more, I simply place my adjective between these two components. However, if my adjective is short, so it is here long, it has one syllable, for example, so it's very short, or it has two syllables, such as happy, that is a different scenario. So in this case, we're not going to use more than, we're going to replace the more, we're going to replace it with the ER, which we are going to stick at the end of the adjective. Longer than. Happier than. So there are no major changes here. Some spelling changes do occur. So here if my adjective ends in a Y, I will replace that Y by an I and have happier than. It sounds the same, but the spelling is different. Big, for example, is a short adjective also. We're going to double the G before adding the ER. Bigger. Okay, so there are some spelling changes there to watch out for. And if I have adjectives that are two syllables long, and end in ER, LE or OW, so clever, gentle, narrow, for example, I add the ER to the end. In this case, obviously there's already an E, so I'm going to add just the R, so be careful here. No major changes there. There are, however, some adjectives which work with both. You can hear, in conversation you'll be able to hear this, it is more quiet than, or it is quieter than. It is more simple than that, it is simpler than that. So some adjectives work with both rules, whatever sounds right. And finally, these exceptions. So good, bad and far are regular with the comparative of equality and inferiority. However, here they change quite radically. Good, we do not say more good than or gooder than, that is wrong. We just change it completely and we say better than, worse than, so that's bad. We don't say badder or more bad, we say worse than. Far becomes farther or further, your choice. You can either keep the A or change it for a U. Farther or further than. So that was the final option of the three comparatives. Now let's look at the superlatives. Now the superlatives is when we are stressing the extreme quality of one thing over 3 or more other things. The least, the most, so the superlative of inferiority, the least, or superiority, the most or the least. And we simply place the adjective after one or the other. The least charming, the most charming, the least expensive, the most expensive, the least compelling, the most compelling. No changes there. Changes often occur here, just like with this particular case. What happens? We simply place our adjective, if it's short, so if it's 1 or 2 syllables long, we place it here just before est. So we're going to stick est to the end. The longest, the happiest, the biggest. Be careful there, spelling changes again, we double the G. The longest, the happiest, the biggest. And the exceptions, always with good, bad and far, they change completely. The best, the worst, and the farthest and the furthest. Now what to watch out for in the classroom? You want to avoid certain mistakes such as it is less stronger instead of it is less strong. It is much more easy. You'll hear that a lot with beginners and intermediate students. So be careful there. We cannot say it is much more easy. We can say it's much easier or it's easier. You'll also hear the worse. This is the worse instead of the worst. T, 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 T. Repeat that to the students and they'll start auto-correcting, self-correcting. So the worst is a terrible mistake, so watch out for that one. You'll also hear things such as it is more funnier. So they're already adding the ER, but they're keeping the more at the beginning, which is incorrect. So students will say things such as it is more funnier, so be careful. You'll also hear mistakes such as it is easier that, be careful. It's never that, it's always than, yeah? So than and than. So for inferiority and superiority, when comparing, than, never that, yeah? So easier that is incorrect. And finally, I've heard other mistakes such as it is as good like. So be careful, it's always as, not as like. Okay, so as good as would be correct. And that's it really, those are your hints for the classroom. And yeah, thanks for watching once again. See you soon.